Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim. Welcome to the Missing Dots. Tonight we step into one of the most uncomfortable, unspoken, and intellectually explosive questions in the Muslim world. Why do so many Muslims, including scholars, preachers, dawah movements, and entire institutions, desperately chase every new scientific discovery and force it into the Quran and Hadith? Why do we rush to claim the Big Bang in Al-Fakir, Walter Roth's evolution in Turab, quantum physics in the Rat, and embryology in verses that classical scholars never interpreted scientifically? What fear drives this obsession? Is it insecurity? Is it a crisis of confidence? Is it a reaction to colonial trauma? Or is it a silent admission that we no longer trust our own scripture unless science validates it? And if the Quran is truly divine, why reinterpret verses after discoveries, not before? Why do we celebrate scientific miracles only when Western scientists publish them? Are we defending Islam or unintentionally weakening it? Tonight, as a scientist, a historian, a mufti, and an Islamic scholar, I will dissect the psychology, theology, sociology, and history behind this phenomenon. No excuses, no emotional sugarcoating, just evidence, references, and the uncomfortable truth that many fear to confront.
You know, sitting out here in the courtyard with the evening prayer just finished, and it's so quiet right now, hearing you lay all that out so plainly, it really does sit heavy in the chest.
Yeah, it really is a heavy topic.
It is, and I mean, for anyone sitting with us right now, just listening to this conversation in the quiet of their own home or maybe driving, I imagine it might feel a bit jarring.
Right. Because it's sensitive?
Very sensitive, because so many of us, we grew up with these ideas. We were handed those pamphlets after Jummah.
Oh, absolutely. The VHS tapes, the YouTube videos.
Exactly, telling us that these scientific miracles were the ultimate undeniable proof of our faith. So to question them feels, for a lot of people, like you're questioning the foundation of the religion itself.
Right, like you're attacking it.
But I really want to set a clear intention for us right now. We are not having this conversation to attack the Quran or to attack faith. It's actually quite the opposite.
We're trying to protect it.
Yes. The goal tonight, with all these, classical tafsirs and historical texts sitting between us, is to look at this modern movement objectively, this whole effort to find empirical science in Scripture, which is called al-ijaz al-ilmi.
Yeah, we have to look at where it came from.
Exactly. What are its mechanics? And most importantly, what is it doing to the minds and hearts of our youth?
That intention is just, it's so vital because it really does feel like we are touching a live wire here. We sort of have this habit as a community of treating these modern apologetics as if they were, I don't know, sent down with the revelation itself.
Right, like they're sacred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we are going to understand why Muslims today are so obsessed with finding like astrophysics or microbiology in the text, we have to establish a baseline.
We have to look at the past.
Right, because if you're listening to this, you might just assume that Muslims have always read the text this way.
Yeah.
But, I mean, looking at the sources we gathered, Al-Tabari, Al-Razi, Ibn Kathir, it's painfully obvious they didn't do this.
They absolutely did not. And grasping that historical reality is really the first step to making sense of where we are today.
Because they had a totally different methodology.
Completely different.
Yeah.
If you open the works of the greatest classical exegetes, the scholars who dedicated their entire existences to understanding the text, take someone like Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, for example.
Right, he was brilliant.
Encyclopedic knowledge. I mean, he knew the sciences of his day inside and out. He knew astronomy, medicine, the philosophical debates of the Greeks and Persians.
But he didn't use that for his tafsir.
No. When he sat down to write his Tafsir al-Kabir, he did not try to turn the Quran into a textbook of natural philosophy. He and, Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir, they were looking for linguistic majesty.
Right, they were looking for ethics.
Yeah.
Jurisprudence.
Exactly. Theology. They approached the Quran exactly as it identifies itself, which is huda.
Guidance.
Yes, moral and spiritual guidance.
So wait, let me push back on that just a little bit. Because the Islamic Golden Age is famous precisely for its scientific output.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
I mean, you have figures like Ibn al-Haytham fundamentally rewriting the rules of optics, or al-Biruni calculating the circumference of the Earth using, astrolabes and trigonometry.
Ibn Sina in medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these were deeply devout men. They prayed, they fasted. So when they made these monumental empirical discoveries, are you saying they never once turned to the text and said, aha, my equation for light refraction was hidden in this verse all along?
They never did.
Wow.
Never.
The silence on that front is profound. I mean, Ibn al-Haytham is often credited as the architect of the early scientific method. He insisted on empirical observation, mathematical proof. reproducible experiments.
Right, he was a serious scientist.
And a man of profound faith. He explicitly stated that seeking knowledge of the natural world was a way to draw closer to God. But he never claimed his discoveries were derived from some secret scientific code inside the Quran.
So he kept them separate. He viewed the study of nature as a separate, parallel act of worship. He looked at the natural world to see the majesty of the Creator using his God-given intellect.
To figure out how light actually worked.
Right. The idea of opening a holy text to locate the speed of light or the exact radius of the Earth, it would have struck them as a category error.
A category error.
Yeah, it would be like trying to measure the physical weight of a poem. They revered the text far too much to reduce it to a catalog of earthly data.
You know, that's a brilliant way to phrase it. It's like taking a profound, life-altering letter from someone you love, and instead of reading it to understand their heart and what they want from you, you start analyzing the chemical composition of the ink.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. Like you're so busy proving the ink is high quality that you completely ignore the actual message.
Yes, you completely miss the soul of it. And the classical scholars were highly sensitive to this danger. They actually had a specific term for the threat of imposing external frameworks onto the revelation. They warned fiercely against tafsir by al-Ray.
Right. Interpretation by mere opinion.
Exactly. Or forcing an external foreign agenda onto the verses. They believed that to extract a meaning from a verse that the Arabic language of the 7th century simply could not support.
A meaning the companions wouldn't have understood.
Right. That was seen as a severe overstep.
Yeah.
So this whole practice of treating the Quran as an empirical encyclopedia, it is entirely alien to the first 1,300 years of our intellectual tradition.
Okay, so if the great classical scholars warned against this and the legendary Muslim scientists never did it, how did we get here?
It's a huge jump.
It is, because if you look around today, it is the dominant language of Islamic apologetics. It's everywhere. So when did this massive shift actually happen?
Well, to understand the shift, we really have to talk about trauma.
Nama.
Yeah. Specifically, the historical and psychological shock of the colonial encounter in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, try to put yourself in the shoes of a Muslim living in the late 1800s. For centuries, the Islamic civilization, even with all its internal political fractures, viewed itself as the center of global knowledge, military might, cultural sophistication.
We were at the top.
Right. And then, in what felt like a historical blink of an eye, the power dynamic violently inverted. Napoleon invades Egypt, the British colonize India, the French take North Africa.
The Ottoman Empire is slowly collapsing.
Exactly. Suddenly, Muslims find themselves militarily defeated, economically hollowed out, and intellectually marginalized by European powers.
And the colonizers didn't just bring guns and, trade companies. They brought a very specific narrative about civilization.
Precisely. The European narrative was basically, we possess empirical science, we have the Enlightenment, we are modern, rational, progressive.
And you are backward.
You are superstitious, backward, and stagnant, and your religion is the cause of your decline.
Man, if you're told that for generations, while watching foreign armies patrol your streets and foreign administrators run your schools, the intellectual whiplash must have been agonizing.
It was.
Just this overwhelming feeling of being completely left behind by history.
It birthed a profound civilizational crisis of confidence. Early reformers, people like Jamal al-Din al-Afghani and Muhammad Abduh, they wrestled with this heavily.
They tried to reconcile that, right?
They desperately wanted to awaken the Muslim world. They argued that Islam was inherently rational, that it championed the intellect.
That science and faith weren't enemies.
Right, but they were largely dealing in broad philosophical strokes. The actual explosion of the scientific miracles movement, like when it became a heavily funded global industry, that happened much more recently.
Really? How recently?
It basically traces back to a very specific moment in 1976.
1976. I mean, that is just yesterday in the context of a 1,400-year-old faith.
Literally a blink of an eye.
The sources point to this French doctor, Maurice Bucaille. Tell me about him, because his name gets thrown around constantly, but we rarely actually examine his credentials or his motivations.
Maurice Bucaille is the linchpin of all this. He was a French gastroenterologist.
Wait, a stomach doctor?
Yes. He was not an Islamic scholar. He was not an Arabist or a linguist. He was a medical doctor who had been appointed to examine the mummy of the pharaoh Ramesses II.
Okay.
And in 1976, he published a book titled The Bible, the Quran, and Science.
Right, I've seen that book everywhere.
His central thesis was explosive. He argued that while the Old and New Testaments were riddled with scientific errors and contradictions, the Quran was perfectly, flawlessly aligned with modern empirical science.
Wow.
He claimed it contained highly specific biological, cosmological, and geological data that just couldn't possibly have been known by a man in 7th century Arabia.
And the Muslim world, which was still reeling from that colonial inferiority complex we just talked about, they must have viewed this book as absolute vindication.
It was water in the desert. They didn't just read the book, they built an empire upon it. This moment birthed what academics and sociologists now call Buchaism.
Buchaism.
Yeah. And you have to look at the geopolitical context of the 1970s and 80s, too. You have the petrodollar boom.
Right. Massive, sudden wealth in the Gulf.
Exactly. That wealth met this new apologetic narrative, and it became a globally funded enterprise. In 1984, the Commission on Scientific Science in the Quran and Sunnah was established.
Millions of dollars poured into it.
Millions upon millions, translating Buchai's book into dozens of languages, printing glossy pamphlets, hosting massive international conferences, television programs.
So finding science in the Quran transitioned from kind of a fringe coping mechanism to the absolute gold standard of Islamic dawah.
Precisely.
Which really brings us back to the psychological mechanism operating beneath the surface here. Because if you're sitting with us and thinking about this, you can feel the emotional weight of it. We're really talking about Fanon's concept of the colonized mind, aren't we?
We are.
Fanon wrote brilliantly about how the colonized subject eventually internalizes the values, the metrics, and the gaze of the colonizer.
That is the exact psychological mechanism at play here. The West established a new absolute rule for the modern world. Empirical science is the sole, ultimate arbiter of truth.
Right. If you can't measure it in a lab, it's not real.
Exactly. If it can't be weighed, observed under a microscope, or proven mathematically, it is fundamentally meaningless. And subconsciously deeply insecure post-colonial Muslims agreed to this new rule.
We bought into it.
We did. We felt this desperate, unspoken need to submit our holy text to the tribunal of Western science. We essentially looked at the dominant global culture and said, oh, you worship science. You only respect empirical data. Well, look at our book. Our book has your science in it. Therefore, you must respect us.
Subhanallah. We submitted the revelation to their tribunal. We allowed a shifting human methodology, the scientific method, to sit in judgment over the eternal word of God.
Yes. It operates purely as a psychological defense mechanism. Because when a marginalized youth in Paris or London or, a struggling student in Cairo or Karachi hears that a Western scientist validated a verse in the Quran,
It gives them a burst of pride.
an immediate euphoric hit of civilizational pride. It soothes the anxiety of feeling backward. By claiming we had this knowledge first, we reclaim a sense of intellectual superiority.
But it's a hollow superiority.
Yeah.
It really is, because we're just claiming ownership of other people's homework.
It's exactly what it is.
We sit back while secular scientists build the Large Hadron Collider, launch the James Webb Space Telescope, map the human genome. They spend decades running tedious, grueling experiments.
Doing the actual work.
Right, and the moment they win a Nobel Prize, we quickly flip through our pages, find a poetic verse, stretch the Arabic, and say, see, we knew that 1,400 years ago.
It is a really harsh mirror to look into, but sociologically, that is exactly what we are doing. Thinkers like Ziauddin Sardar or the physicist Pervez Hoodbhoy, they've written extensively on how catastrophic this is for actual Muslim scientific output.
Because it breeds complacency.
A profound intellectual complacency. I mean, if you genuinely believe that the blueprints for quantum mechanics, embryology, and deep space astronomy are already perfectly encoded in a book sitting on your bedside table, what is your motivation to go out and observe the natural world?
You lose the drive to discover.
You completely lose the friction, the curiosity. You replace the arduous physical labor of scientific inquiry with lazy semantic games.
I want to talk about that dynamic of seeking validation, actually. Because there is a phenomenon I remember seeing constantly growing up. You go to these massive conferences or watch these heavily edited documentaries.
Oh, the format is always exactly the same.
Always. There's a prominent Western scientist, usually an older white guy in a suit or a lab coat. He's flown out to a Muslim country, put up in a 5-star hotel, given the VIP treatment.
Wined and dined.
Exactly. And a Muslim apologist sits across from him, presents an English translation of a verse, and essentially prompts him. Dr. So-and-so, wouldn't you agree this sounds remarkably like the modern understanding of embryonic development?
And the scientist often is being polite to his hosts.
Right, he says, yes, there is a fascinating resemblance.
And that single polite soundbite is then isolated, edited, put to dramatic background music.
Plastered all over the internet.
As the ultimate undeniable proof of Islam, this is what we call the outsourcing of epistemology. We are literally outsourcing the validation of our faith to secular academics.
While ignoring everything else about them.
Completely ignoring it. We ignore the fact that this scientist might be an atheist, might hold philosophical views entirely hostile to Islam, and certainly has zero training in classical Arabic morphology or usul al-tafsir.
We don't care about his worldview. We just want his stamp of approval.
It is therapeutic identity politics masquerading as theology.
But let's dig into the actual mechanics of how this is done. Because if you're listening to this and you've seen these pamphlets, you know they can look incredibly convincing.
Very slick.
The apologist puts the Arabic word on the screen, puts the modern scientific textbook definition right next to it, and it looks like a perfect lock and key fit.
Yeah.
How are they constructing these miracles? What's the methodological trap here?
The trap lies in the fundamental flaw of post hoc rationalization.
Post hoc, after the fact.
Exactly, after the fact. I want you to really think about this question. Why are these breathtaking, miraculous scientific facts only ever discovered in the Quran after secular science has already established them?
Right.
If the Quran is a book of clear scientific data, why doesn't a Muslim scholar read a verse today, publish a groundbreaking paper in a peer-reviewed physics journal predicting a completely unknown cosmological model, and then wait for scientists to build a telescope and verify it 20 years later?
Because it only works in reverse. The science has to exist first so they know what target they're aiming at.
Exactly. And the vehicle they use to hit that target is the linguistic ambiguity of the Arabic language.
Which is very rich.
Incredibly rich. Classical Arabic is poetic, it's dense, and it's highly polysemous, meaning a single root word can carry multiple layered meanings depending on the context. Arabic words are built on triliteral roots, those 3 consonant letters.
Right.
And the morphology, the wazn or pattern applied to those letters, shades the meaning. So what modern apologists do is employ a tactic called semantic stretching.
Semantic stretching.
Yeah. They take an ancient Arabic word, strip it completely of its historical context, rummage through the furthest, most obscure corners of its etymological root, and basically stretch it until it somehow fits a highly specific 21st century scientific concept.
Give me a concrete example of this, because I know this happens all the time with verses about the earth.
Oh, the most famous example is the word daha in Surah An-Naziyat, verse 30. The verse reads, Wal arda bada talika daha.
Okay, so how is that traditionally understood?
For over 1,000 years, if you opened any classical lexicon, like Ibn Manzur's Lisan al-Arab, or read any major tafsir, the word daha was understood simply and beautifully. It meant he spread it out, or he made it vast.
Right, which makes perfect sense to a 7th century Arab looking out at the horizon. The earth looks spread out.
Yes, exactly. It was a description of God making the earth a habitable, expansive expanse for humanity to live upon. But in the modern era, we know the earth is not a flat expanse.
It's a sphere, an oblate spheroid.
Right. So apologists panicked. They couldn't handle a verse that just said spread out. They needed a sphere. So they dug into the root letters, dalawa.
And what did they find?
They found that in some obscure Bedouin usages, a derivative of this root was used to describe the nest of an ostrich, or the act of an ostrich pushing the dirt to make a hollow for its egg.
Wait, really?
Yes. And through a series of massive linguistic leaps, the apologists emerged and boldly declared, the Quran does not say the earth is spread out. It says the earth is shaped exactly like an ostrich egg. Look at the perfect geometry.
I grew up hearing that. Literally, the earth is shaped like an ostrich egg, and the Quran predicted it.
It is a fabrication. Linguistically, it is a severe distortion. You are taking a verb that meant the action of spreading or preparing, and you're transforming it into a specific noun describing the physical geometry of an egg solely to appease modern science.
Classical scholars would have hated that.
They would have viewed it as a severe violation of the Arabic language. But, you know, the linguistic manipulation isn't even the most dangerous part.
What is?
The true danger is theological. It is the danger of tying the Quran to the scientific method itself.
Broke that down for me. Because most people just think science is a list of absolute facts. You know, gravity, photosynthesis, the boiling point of water.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what science actually is. Science is not a catalog of absolute unchanging truths. Science is a method. The philosopher Karl Popper laid out the principle of falsifiability, which is the cornerstone of modern science. For a theory to be scientific, it must be testable, and there must be a structural possibility that it could be proven wrong by future data.
So it's always open to being wrong.
Exactly. Science is inherently provisional. It is a working model of reality that is constantly updating, constantly correcting itself. What the scientific consensus fiercely defends as a hard fact today might be completely overturned or heavily modified in 50 years when we build a better microscope or a stronger telescope.
Okay, so science is a moving target. It is always shifting.
Now, compare that to the Muslim understanding of the Quran. For a Muslim, the Quran is the eternal, absolute, infallible, uncreated word of God. It does not change.
Right.
So I ask you, what happens when you take the eternal, unmoving word of God and you tether it to a provisional, constantly shifting scientific theory?
You're building a house on quicksand.
That's exactly what you're doing.
That is terrifying when you put it like that.
Let me give you a historical example. In the 1920s and 30s, the dominant scientific consensus in cosmology was the steady-state theory. The brightest minds on Earth believed the universe was static, infinite, and eternal. It had no beginning.
Okay.
Now, imagine a zealous Muslim apologist in 1925. He wants to prove the Quran is scientific. So he takes a verse about the heavens, stretches the Arabic, and proudly announces, look, the Quran clearly states the universe is static and eternal, a perfect scientific miracle matching the steady-state theory.
But then the 1960s happen.
Yes.
The cosmic microwave background radiation is discovered. The scientific consensus violently shifts. The steady-state theory is thrown in the trash, and the Big Bang theory, a universe with a definitive beginning that is expanding, becomes the new fact.
Exactly. So what happens to our apologist in 1965? By tying his theology to the science of 1925, he has accidentally rendered the Quran wrong in 1965.
Wow.
When you marry your theology to the science of today, you will be a widow tomorrow. It is a highly unstable foundation for faith.
You know, it's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy on a cosmic scale.
Oh, absolutely.
If you've never heard of this fallacy, imagine a guy who walks up to a wooden barn, pulls out a gun, and just fires wildly into the side of the barn. Then he walks up to the wood, finds a cluster of bullet holes, and paints a bullseye directly over them. He steps back and says, "Look what a perfect shot I am."
That is a perfect analogy.
We wait to see where the science lands, we fire an ambiguous Quranic verse at it, and then we draw the theological bullseye around it.
And to draw that bullseye, modern apologists are forced to casually discard 1,400 years of consensus. They throw out the historical context of the Prophet's companions. They throw out the strict rules of classical Arabic grammar.
All just to make sure the bullet is perfectly in the center of a modern physics paper.
Exactly.
I think we need to move from the abstract to the concrete here. We need to look at the actual verses that are circulated every single day on WhatsApp, on TikTok, in Friday sermons.
Let's do it.
Let's apply this scrutiny to the heavy hitters. Let's start with the Big Bang, because you hear this all the time. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 30.
Yes. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 30. The English translation that apologists usually present reads something like, "Have those who disbelieved not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity and we separated them?"
Okay.
The crucial Arabic words here are ratker, which means joined, closed, or stitched together, and fetko, which means separated, open, or unstitched. Modern apologists confidently, aggressively claim this is a precise, flawless description of the initial singularity and the Big Bang.
And I have to admit, if you just read that English translation with a 21st century scientific framework in your head, it sounds incredibly compelling. The universe was one dense point, and then it expanded outward.
It sounds compelling only because we are importing our modern cosmological bias into the text. Let's look at how classical scholars, the people who actually spoke the language of the revelation, understood it.
What did Al-Tabari say?
When Al-Tabari interprets this verse, he relies on the narrations of Ibn Abbas and the early commentators. They did not see astrophysics. They saw an agricultural reality.
Agriculture.
Yes. They explained that the skies were rat closed off, meaning they were holding back rain, and the earth was rat closed off, meaning it was dry and no plants were growing. Then God intervened and separated them, or opened them, fat Q. He opened the sky with rain, and he opened the earth with vegetation.
Oh, wow. That completely reframes the entire verse. And logically, that flows perfectly into the very next sentence of that exact same verse, which says, "And we made from water every living thing."
Exactly.
It's a localized, observable phenomenon about the cycle of life, rain, and agriculture. not the creation of metric spacetime.
Precisely. And there is an even deeper historical layer here. The imagery of the heavens and earth originally being joined as a single mass, and then a deity separating them to create the world as we know it. That was not a revolutionary new concept in the 7th century.
It was.
No. It was an incredibly common, pervasive mythological trope throughout the ancient Near East. You find almost identical imagery in the ancient Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh. You find it in the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. You find it in ancient Egyptian cosmology with the gods Geb and Nut.
So if a 7th century Arab heard the Quran talk about the heavens and earth being joined and then separated, they wouldn't fall to their knees in shock at a revelation of quantum physics.
No.
They would just recognize a familiar cultural idiom being used to emphasize God's power over nature.
Exactly. The Quran is communicating with its immediate audience using conceptual language they already understood, redirecting their awe toward the one true creator. Turning it into a hidden Big Bang equation completely strips the verse of its actual rhetorical power.
Okay, let's move to the most sensitive one, the absolute centerpiece of Bikaiism, embryology. Surah Al-Mu'minun, verses 12 to 14. We are taught from a very young age that the Quran maps out the exact sequence of human embryonic development with microscopic precision. The sequence of Nutfa, the Dropalika, and Muga, the chewed-like lump.
This is the argument that practically built the modern dawa industry, and the entire claim usually pivots on one specific word, alaka.
Right.
If you read modern apologetic literature, they will invariably translate alaka as a leech, or a leech-like substance. They will pull up a microscope photograph of a human embryo at roughly 24 days of development, place it next to a photograph of a literal leech, and point out that they look remarkably similar.
The embryo is curved, it's attached to the uterine wall, it draws blood from the mother, just like a leech.
Exactly. It is an incredibly visually persuasive argument.
It really is. I remember seeing those exact diagrams in Sunday school. But if I'm tracking with the methodology we just discussed, I'm guessing classical scholars did not translate alaka as a leech.
For over a millennium, virtually every major classical lexicon and exegete translated alaka as a blood clot, or clinging blood. They understood the term based on what was physically observable to the naked eye, particularly in the tragic event of a miscarriage.
Right, what they could actually see.
The shift to translating it primarily as a leech is a modern post hoc adjustment explicitly engineered to match modern microscopic imagery, but the linguistic debate over alaka is actually the lesser issue here.
He gets course.
The fatal flaw of the embryology miracle is what historians of science call the Galen problem.
Walk me through the Galen problem. Who was Galen and why does he matter to a conversation about the Quran?
Galen of Pergamon was arguably the most prominent and influential Greek physician of antiquity. He lived in the 2nd century, roughly 500 years before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay.
Galen wrote extensively on anatomy and reproduction. His texts, such as the Treatise on Semen, were considered the absolute gold standard of medical knowledge. And crucially, this knowledge did not stay in Greece. It was translated into Syriac and later Arabic.
So it spread.
It circulated widely throughout the Middle East, Persia, and the Arabian Peninsula. There was a famous medical academy in Jindishapur in the Sassanid Empire, just a journey away from Arabia. Arabs of the 7th century were heavily engaged in regional trade. They had their own physicians, like Al-Harith ibn Khalada, who allegedly studied in Persia and was a contemporary of the Prophet.
So Greek medical knowledge was just the common currency of the region. It wasn't completely isolated.
Exactly. Now, if you read Galen's writings on how a fetus develops, he explicitly outlines 4 distinct stages.
What were they?
First, the generation of semen. Second, the semen transforms into a fleshy, blood-filled substance. Third, the solid formation of the skeletal system, the bones. And fourth, the flesh and muscles grow over and around the bones to clothe them.
I have to pause you there, because that sequence, semen, a bloody clot, the lump, then the bones forming, and then the flesh clothing the bones. That is almost verbatim the sequence described in Surah Al-Mu'minun.
It is.
The Quran says, we made the drop into a clot, then we made the clot into a lump, then we made from the lump bones, and we clothe the bones with flesh.
Yes. The developmental sequence described in the Quran perfectly mirrors the prevailing medical understanding of late antiquity, which was heavily dominated by the theories of Galen and Hippocrates before him. The Arabs of the Hijaz would have been broadly familiar with these concepts. It was the science of their day.
But wait, if apologists argue that the Quran contains flawless modern science, how does modern embryology view Galen's sequence? Does modern science actually say the bones form first, and then the flesh wraps around them?
No. And this is where the brittle bridge snaps. Modern high-resolution embryology fundamentally disagrees with Galen's sequence.
Really?
Yes. In modern biology, the skeletal system and the muscular system develop simultaneously in tandem from the exact same mesodermal tissue layer.
Oh, wow.
The bones do not sit there fully formed, waiting to be subsequently clothed with muscle tissue. They grow and differentiate together.
So the apologists are forcing a scientific miracle out of a verse that actually just reflects the common historical medical knowledge of the 7th century. Knowledge that we now understand is biologically imprecise.
Precisely. They're defending a Greek biological error as a divine scientific miracle.
I have to be entirely honest with you, and with anyone listening right now, hearing this laid out so clinically, it is incredibly uncomfortable. It hurts.
I know.
So many of us grew up being told the embryology verse was the ultimate trump card. If an atheist challenged you, you played the embryology card. To hear that it heavily mirrors Greek physicians, that it actually conflicts with modern developmental biology, it feels like we've been setting ourselves up for intellectual humiliation.
The discomfort is completely valid. It is a painful realization. But the intellectual humiliation has already happened.
What do you mean?
You don't have to take my word for it. Look at the real-world actions of the Dawa organizations themselves. Take IERA, the Islamic Education and Research Academy. For years, they were arguably the loudest, most well-funded voices promoting the embryology miracle in the West. They debated atheists on university stages using these exact arguments.
So what happened to them?
They faced the firing squad of actual peer-reviewed science. Biologists, embryologists, and scientifically literate critics online systematically dismantled their claims. They pointed out the Galen connection. They pointed out the simultaneous development of mesodermal tissue.
And they couldn't respond.
The criticism was so thorough, so undeniable, that IRA was forced to quietly abandon the embryology claim entirely.
You're kidding.
No. They eventually published a deeply revealing internal paper, essentially admitting that the scientific miracles methodology is inherently flawed, that science changes, and that Muslims should abandon this approach and focus on the theological and linguistic message instead.
That is a staggering admission.
Yeah.
The champions of the movement had to retreat when actual scientists entered the room.
Exactly.
Let's look at one final case study before we move on.
Yeah.
Cosmology, the expanding universe. Surah Ad-Dariyat, verse 47.
Yes, Surah Ad-Dariyat, verse 47. The verse reads, Valsama bananaha bayadin waina lamusian. If you open a modern apologetic translation, it almost always renders it as, and the heaven we constructed with strength, and indeed, we are expanding it.
Right.
They explicitly link the word Lamusian to Edwin Hubble's 1929 discovery that the universe is undergoing metric expansion.
And based on everything we have discussed tonight, I am going to assume that for the first 1,000 years of Islamic history, no one translated Musiyun as physical expansion.
You would be completely correct. The root of the word wasin an relates to vastness, immense capacity, wealth, or enrichment. If you look at Al-Qurtubi's Tafsir or Ibn Kathir's, they interpreted it as a statement of God's overwhelming capability.
Well, how did they translate it?
They translated it as, we made it vast, or we are capable, or we are the enricher. It was a theological statement about divine majesty, assuring the reader that the God who built the vast, unquantifiable sky is certainly capable of resurrecting the dead.
But after 1929...
After 1929, Hubble observes the redshift of distant galaxies. He proves metric expansion. Suddenly, apologists realize the root word contains a concept of widening or making vast, and they artificially constrain the meaning to refer strictly to the continuous physical expansion of space-time.
More semantic stretching.
Once again, it is post hoc semantic stretching. By ignoring the historical context, the classical Arabic usage, and the theological flow of the chapter, we force the text to mimic an astrophysics textbook just to claim a hollow victory.
If we step back and look at this logically, it raises a massive epistemological dilemma. Let's do a consistency test here. If this methodology, taking an ancient poetic text, stretching the definitions of its words, aggressively ignoring historical context, and retrofitting it to match a modern scientific discovery, if this methodology legitimately proves that a text is from God, what happens when followers of other religions use the exact same playbook? Because we're not the only ones doing this, are we?
Not at all. And this is the giant elephant in the room that apologists absolutely refuse to address. If you study comparative religion, you will find that followers of almost every ancient revered text play this exact same hermeneutical game.
Who else does it?
Take Hindu nationalists, for example. There is a massive subculture in India that claims ancient Vedic texts possess perfect scientific foresight. They will quote Sanskrit verses and claim with absolute unshakable certainty that their ancestors mapped out quantum mechanics, atomic theory, and the exact speed of light thousands of years before Newton or Einstein.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
They point to ancient descriptions of flying chariots, the Vimanas, and claim it proves they invented aeronautics and space travel. What about Christianity?
Christian apologists are masters of this. They will point to the Book of Job, which mentions the circle of the earth, and loudly claim the Bible predicted a spherical planet centuries before the Greeks.
Right.
They find poetic verses about rain and rivers in Genesis or Ecclesiastes, stretch the Hebrew, and claim the Bible contains a perfect, scientifically rigorous model of the hydrological water cycle. Even Buddhist scholars have gotten in on the act.
Booze, too.
Yeah, arguing that ancient texts discussing the impermanence of reality were actually direct, miraculous predictions of the probabilistic, uncertain nature of the quantum universe.
This creates a total epistemological collapse.
Yeah.
Because if post hoc semantic stretching is the gold standard for proving a text is divine, then the Bible must be divine. The Vedas must be divine. The Buddhist sutras must be divine. Because they're all utilizing the exact same linguistic gymnastics that we are using.
Exactly. It completely neutralizes the argument that the Quran is unique in this regard. If a methodology validates every single competing, contradictory religious text on Earth, then the methodology itself is entirely useless for proving exclusivity.
Let me put you in a very real scenario. Imagine I am sitting across a table from a very polite, very earnest Christian apologist. He opens his Bible to the Book of Job, reads me a poetic verse about rain, and says, look, the Bible predicted the hydrological water cycle. This proves Jesus is Lord.
How would you respond?
I would dismantle his argument instantly. I would say, with all due respect, you are taking ancient poetry entirely out of context. Human beings have watched rain fall from clouds and rivers flow into oceans for millennia. It is basic human observation. It is not a supernatural prediction of modern meteorology.
That is a perfectly rational, historically grounded response.
But here is the crisis. If I apply that critical thinking to his book, how can I turn around, open the Quran, point to a verse about the sky being vast, and claim it proves Hubble's metric expansion?
Right.
How can I point to a verse about embryonic stages that mirrors Greek medicine and claim it proves modern biology? If I reject his semantic stretching but celebrate my own, doesn't this massive, glaring double standard completely destroy our intellectual credibility?
It absolutely incinerates our credibility, and this is exactly how secular academics, biologists, and atheist critics view these arguments when we bring them to the public square.
They see right through it.
They view them as intellectually dishonest and highly tribal. They look at us and say, you demand rigorous skepticism and historical context when analyzing other people's holy books, but you completely suspend all critical thinking when reading your own.
We hold a double standard.
It proves to the outside, objective observer that the miracle does not actually reside in the text itself. The miracle is entirely manufactured by the desperate bias of the interpreter. You see exactly what you want to see.
You know, this conversation is taking a very somber turn, and I want to speak directly to you listening to this right now. We are not just debating linguistic history or abstract theology anymore. We are talking about the survival of faith in the modern world.
Yes, we are.
There is a devastating, real-world, human cost to this methodology, and it is happening right now in our own communities.
There is a profound human cost. And this is exactly why I said at the very beginning of our conversation that we are doing this to protect faith, not attack it. Over the last 40 years, the Dawa industry has constructed what sociologists and pastoral care workers are now calling the brittle bridge.
Explain the mechanics of the brittle bridge.
For decades, young Muslims in the West and increasingly in the East have been raised in homes, weekend schools, and mosques being implicitly taught an equation. Islam equals scientific perfection.
Right, we link the two entirely.
Their foundational understanding of why they should believe the Quran is the word of God is built almost entirely on these Bucaist scientific miracles. We tell them, you don't need blind faith. Islam is objectively true because it perfectly predicted embryology, astrophysics, and geology.
We set that as the standard.
We build their entire worldview, their entire connection to the divine, on this highly unstable bridge of empirical claims.
And what happens when a bright, curious 18-year-old walks across that bridge?
The bridge collapses. That young person goes to university. They sit in a university-level biology class or an advanced physics class or a historiography seminar. They learn how the scientific method actually works. They learn about confirmation bias. They learn about Galen.
Or they just log onto the internet.
Even more commonly today, they log on to Reddit, they find ex-Muslim communities or atheist debate forums where these specific, highly touted scientific miracles are systematically, mercilessly dismantled.
And they can't unsee it.
And because we told them that the absolute proof of their religion was this embryology claim, when the embryology claim shatters, their entire faith shatters along with it.
We are seeing this happen in real time. It is an epidemic.
It really is.
If you take the time to read the testimonies from ex-Muslim communities, whether it's public figures like Ali Rizvi or Sarah Hayter, or just the thousands of anonymous youth pouring their hearts out on forums, it is terrifying how consistent the narrative is.
Over and over again.
Over and over. They cite the debunking of scientific miracles as the exact precipitating catalyst for the deconversion. They realize the embryology claim is flawed. They realize the expanding universe claim is a linguistic stretch. And the immediate reaction isn't just doubt, it is anger.
They feel profoundly lied to.
Exactly.
They feel betrayed. They feel that the religious authorities, the imams, the YouTube apologists they trusted with their souls were either breathtakingly ignorant of actual science or they were deliberately deceptive.
And frankly, you cannot blame them for feeling that way.
Not at all. We handed them a counterfeit currency, told them it was solid gold, and then act shocked when the bank rejects it. But the truly tragic part of this entire cycle is the pastoral failure that follows.
You mean the reaction of the community when the youth starts asking questions?
Yes. When a young person comes to a scholar, a parent, or a community leader and says, I am struggling, I am having serious doubts because I learned about Galen and this Quranic embryology claim doesn't hold up, what is the standard response?
The youth gets blamed. They are gaslit.
What?
They are told they have a disease in their heart or that their faith is weak.
Exactly.
They're accused of being corrupted by Western universities or told to stop reading dangerous things on the internet.
The religious authorities utterly refuse to take accountability for their own actions. We handed the youth deeply flawed, intellectually dishonest, easily debunked apologetic arguments in the first place. We built the glass house.
And when the glass inevitably shatters, we blame the youth for noticing the broken glass.
It is a massive abdication of pastoral responsibility.
It is painful to articulate. We are basically handing our children a loaded weapon that we know has a faulty mechanism, and when it inevitably blows up in their hands, we blame them for pulling the trigger.
That's a powerful way to put it.
If a young person's entire belief in the creator of the heavens and the earth relies on whether a 24-day-old embryo vaguely resembles a leech under a microscope, their faith is incredibly tragically fragile. We have taken the overwhelming, ineffable majesty of God and reduced it to a cosmic trivia machine.
A cosmic trivia machine. That is a profound indictment. We have completely forgotten that our intellectual tradition historically provided vast, safe spaces for inquiry. In the classical era, questioning assumptions, debating hermeneutics, and seeking truth was viewed as a religious duty.
But
Today, because of this deep-seated apologetic insecurity, asking a basic, historically grounded question about the tafsir of a verse gets you labeled a heretic. We need to completely overhaul our pastoral care. We need to be able to look a struggling student in the eye and say, it is entirely okay if this 7th century poetic verse doesn't neatly align with a 2024 physics textbook. It was never meant to.
which brings us to the most important question of the night. How do we rebuild? If we strip away the pseudoscience, if we dismantle this brittle bridge of Buchaism, and if we stop playing the Texas sharpshooter game, what is left?
You have to ask that.
How do we reclaim the true, enduring miracle of the Quran without constantly begging for external validation from secular science?
We rebuild by going back to our roots. We must return to the robust, unshakable foundations of classical Islamic epistemology.
Okay, so what did that look like?
Well, the towering intellects of our past scholars like Al-Ghazali or philosophers like Ibn Rushd, they understood a fundamental, non-negotiable distinction in how we acquire knowledge. They drew a hard line between akal and naql.
Explain the difference between those two.
Akal is empirical reason, the human intellect, observation, and deduction. It is the tool we use to understand the physical mechanics of the world.
And not?
Naql is transmitted divine revelation. It is the guidance sent down from God. They understood that science, akal, and revelation naql answer fundamentally different questions. They operate in entirely different domains.
So science answers the how, and revelation answers the why.
Exactly. Science is a descriptive tool. It can tell you, with incredible precision, how a cell divides, how gravity bends starlight, or how a fetus physically develops in the womb, but science hits an absolute hard limit.
Right. It can't measure meaning.
It cannot tell you why you exist. It cannot tell you what your moral obligations are to your neighbor. It cannot tell you what happens to the human soul after the brain ceases to function. It cannot tell you how to seek divine forgiveness or how to heal a broken spirit. The Quran steps in precisely where human science exhausts its utility.
When we try to force them to do each other's jobs, we end up doing a massive disservice to both. We ruin the science, and we cheapen the revelation.
It is actually worse than a disservice. Some contemporary theologians argue that obsessing over scientific validation flirts dangerously with shirkul ilm, the concept of associating partners with God in the realm of knowledge.
That's a heavy charge.
It is. But by making human secular science the ultimate final judge of whether God's word is true, we are elevating a human methodology to a divine status it does not deserve. We are adopting scientism, the philosophical belief that empirical science is the only valid way to know truth. Scientism is a secular Western construct. Muslims have absolutely no theological business adopting it to defend Islam.
We need to look at what the text actually claims to be. We touched on this earlier, but it is worth repeating. The Quran explicitly calls itself Huda, guidance. It calls itself Shifa, a healing for the spiritual diseases in the breast of humanity. It calls itself Rahma, a mercy. From Al-Fatiha to Anas, it never once refers to itself as a manual of astrophysics or biology. Its stated purpose is to transform human character, to establish justice and equity in society, and to connect the transient human soul to the eternal Creator. That is the true miracle.
That is the real power of it.
The miracle is that a text revealed in 7th century Arabia can still shatter a human ego, heal a grieving heart, and reorder a society today. The miracle is its moral and spiritual power, not that it secretly contained a hidden equation for quantum entanglement.
Beautifully said. And as part of this rebuilding, we urgently need to recover the classical wisdom of dealing with ambiguous texts. The Quran itself, in Surah Al-Imran, divides its verses into two categories, mukam and mutashabih.
The clear and the ambiguous.
Exactly. The mukam verses are crystal clear foundational instructions. They tell us to establish prayer, to give charity, to act with profound justice, to honor our parents, to care for the orphan.
And the mutashabih.
The mutashabih verses are ambiguous, highly poetic, allegorical, or dealing with the unseen. Classical scholars explicitly, repeatedly warned the masses against obsessing over the ambiguous verses and trying to pin down their exact physical meanings. They had a principle: leave the ambiguous to Allah and act upon the clear.
But the modern scientific miracles movement has done the exact opposite.
A complete inversion. We ignore the clear, incredibly difficult moral imperatives of the Mukam verses, the commands to eradicate poverty, to fight corruption, to purify our own hearts. And instead, we spend all our energy obsessing over whether an ambiguous, poetic word from 1400 years ago secretly means an expanding universe or an ostrich egg. It is a distraction. It is a spiritual evasion.
We need intellectual honesty. Genuine, deeply rooted Islamic confidence doesn't look like an insecure teenager shouting, "We knew it 1400 years ago," every time NASA publishes a new photograph of a nebula. Genuine confidence does not require a white lab coat to validate it.
True confidence is quiet. It is serene. It does not need to shout. It looks like Ibn Rushd, standing in the night, looking up at the stars, using his intellect to marvel at their mechanics, and then calmly returning to his prayer rug. It looks like accepting with total peace that human scientific knowledge will perpetually change, but divine moral guidance remains a constant anchor.
So true faith isn't treating the Quran like a laboratory manual. True faith is looking at a supernova exploding in deep space, or looking through an electron microscope at the breathtaking complexity of a developing embryo, being completely awestruck by the physical mechanics of it, and then letting the Quran tell you what to do with the brief, fragile life you've been given. Let the scientific method show you the majesty of the creation, but let the revelation show you the path to the Creator.
Beautifully synthesized. And I want to leave everyone listening with this reassurance. Abandoning the scientific miracle narrative does not weaken your Islam. It purifies.
It frees you.
It does. It strips away the modern defensive post-colonial anxiety that has infected our theology. It frees you from playing a rigged, deeply dishonest game of scientific apologetics, and it returns the Quran to its rightful, majestic place as the ultimate transcendent guide for the human soul.
As we wrap up this conversation, sitting here as the night deepens, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final historical event to reflect upon. Think about the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There was a deeply painful moment in his life when his infant son, Ibrahim, tragically passed away. The prophet wept.
Profoundly human moment.
But on that exact same day, by pure cosmic coincidence, a solar eclipse occurred. The sky went dark. The people of Medina, in their grief and their awe, immediately drew a causal connection. They started whispering and then saying aloud, "The sun is eclipsed in sadness for the death of Ibrahim."
Think about the temptation in that moment. It was a perfect, convenient, emotionally satisfying scientific miracle. It was a cosmic event that validated his prophethood to everyone watching. It would have solidified his power. It would have silenced any doubters.
But what did the prophetess do? He didn't embrace it. He didn't let the rumor spread. He immediately gathered the people and corrected them. He said, "The sun and the moon are two signs among the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse for the death or life of anyone." He completely rejected a convenient pseudoscientific miracle in favor of empirical honesty and theological purity. If the prophet himself, in a moment of immense grief, absolutely refused to bend natural phenomena to validate his own prophethood, why do we feel the desperate need to do it today? May Allah grant us success. Come on, let's go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.